The rain came down hard that November evening. Inside Windsor Castle, the stone walls held centuries of secrets. But tonight, one more would be added. Lady Louise Windsor stood alone in the East Gallery. Her hands trembled. Tears streamed down her face. She was 20 years old, poised and graceful in public. But right now, she looked like a girl who had just heard something that shattered her world. Officer Thomas Blake had been standing guard outside the private family wing for 3 years. He knew the rhythms of the palace. He knew when something was wrong. And tonight, everything felt wrong. He heard the crying first. Soft, muffled. Coming from behind the tall oak doors of the gallery, Thomas hesitated. Royal guards were trained never to intrude. Privacy was sacred here. But the sound of those sobs made his chest tighten. He knocked gently. "Your Royal Highness? Is everything all right?" Silence. Then a shaky breath. "I'm fine," came the voice. But it was not fine. Anyone could hear that. Thomas made a choice. He pushed the door open just enough to see inside. Lady Louise stood with her back to him, her shoulders shaking. Her phone was on the floor, screen still glowing. If you're watching this story unfold, hit that subscribe button now. Because what happens next will leave you speechless, as Thomas said softly. "You don't look fine," she turned. Her eyes were red and swollen. Mascara traced dark lines down her cheeks. For a moment, she looked at him like she didn't know whether to run or collapse. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered. "I shouldn't have heard it." Thomas stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "Heard what?" Louise looked at the phone on the floor. Her voice cracked. "The truth. It had started 2 hours earlier." Louise had been in her room, finishing an essay for university. Her mother had called her down for tea. A quiet evening, nothing unusual. But as she walked through the corridor, she heard voices, sharp, angry. Her parents were in the drawing room. The door was slightly open. She shouldn't have stopped. But she did. Her father's voice was strained. "We can't keep pretending. She deserves to know." Her mother's reply was cold. "She's not ready. She'll never be ready for this." "Ready for what?" Her father snapped. "The truth about who she really is?" Louise had frozen. Her heart pounded in her ears. Who she really is. What did that mean? Her mother's voice dropped to a whisper, but Louise heard every word. If she finds out what was decided before she was born, it will destroy her. She'll never trust us again. Louise felt the floor tilt beneath her. She backed away from the door, hand over her mouth. Before she was born, something had been decided. Something they had hidden from her for 20 years. She ran. She didn't think. She just ran until she reached the East Gallery, pulled out her phone, and called the one person she thought she could trust. But that person didn't answer. Instead, they sent a text. And that text confirmed her worst fear. Now, standing in front of Officer Blake, Louise felt like her entire life was a lie. She didn't know who to turn to. She didn't know what was real anymore. Thomas watched her carefully. He had no idea what she had heard. But he knew one thing. Whatever it was, it had broken something inside her. "Yeah, do you want me to call someone?" he asked gently. Louise shook her head. "Who would I call?" "Everyone I know is part of it." "Part of what?" She looked at him with hollow eyes. "The secret they've been keeping from me my entire life." Thomas Blake had been trained for many things. Threats, intruders, security breaches. But he had never been trained for this. A young woman, royalty. Crying in an empty gallery because her family had lied to her, he pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and handed it to her. Louise stared at it for a moment, then took it. She wiped her eyes, but the tears kept coming. "Tell me what happened," Thomas said quietly. Louise looked at him. She didn't know this man, but right now, he felt like the only honest person in the building. "They've been lying to me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My whole life." "Who has?" "My parents. Maybe everyone." She sat down on the velvet bench beneath the tall window. The rain hammered against the glass. "I overheard them talking. They said something was decided before I was born. Something they've kept from me." Thomas frowned. What kind of decision? I don't know. Her hands twisted the handkerchief. But it's big. Big enough that my mother said it would destroy me if I found out. The words hung in the air. Thomas felt a chill run down his spine. He had worked in the palace long enough to know that secrets here were different. They weren't just family arguments or hidden mistakes. They were things that could change lives. Reputations, futures. Did you ask them? He said. Louise laughed bitterly. How? How do I walk up to my parents and say, I was eavesdropping on a conversation I wasn't meant to hear? She had a point. Thomas sat down beside her, keeping a respectful distance. What about the text message? You said something about a text. Louise's face crumpled again. She picked up her phone from the floor and handed it to him. The screen was still on. One message. From someone named Charlotte. I'm sorry, Lou. I wanted to tell you so many times. But they made me promise. Please don't hate me. Thomas read it twice. Who's Charlotte? My cousin Louise said. We've been close since we were kids. I called her right after I overheard my parents. I thought she'd tell me I was imagining things. She swallowed hard. But instead she sent me that. Thomas handed the phone back. So she knows the secret. Apparently. Louise nodded. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Everyone knows. Everyone except me. Thomas didn't know what to say. He had seen a lot in his years as a guard. Arguments, tension, cold silences between family members. But this felt different. This felt personal, cruel. What are you going to do? He asked. Louise stared at the rain. I don't know. Part of me wants to march down there right now and demand answers. But another part of me, she trailed off, is afraid of what you'll hear, Thomas finished. She looked at him. Yes, they sat in silence for a moment. Then Thomas spoke. You know what I think? What? I think you're stronger than they give you credit for. Louise blinked. You don't even know me. I know you're sitting here crying, but you haven't run away. You haven't screamed or thrown anything. You're trying to figure it out. He looked at her seriously. That takes strength. Louise wanted to believe him. But right now, she felt anything but strong. She felt small, lost, like a stranger in her own home. What if it's something terrible? She whispered. What if it changes everything? Thomas didn't have an answer for that. Because the truth was, it might. Secrets this big didn't stay hidden for 20 years unless they were dangerous. Then you deal with it, he said. But you deal with it on your terms, not theirs. Louise looked at him. There was something solid about this man, something steady. In a palace full of people who spoke in riddles and half-truths, he felt real. Why are you helping me? She asked. Thomas smiled faintly. Because someone should. Before Louise could respond, footsteps echoed in the hallway, fast, deliberate. Someone was coming. Louise stood quickly. Her eyes went wide. If they find me here like this, go, Thomas said, gesturing toward the side door. There's a servant's staircase. No one will see you. Louise hesitated. Then she grabbed his hand. Thank you. She slipped through the door just as it opened. Thomas turned. Standing in the doorway was the Duchess of Edinburgh, Louise's mother. Her face was pale, her expression tight. Officer Blake, she said coolly. Have you seen my daughter? Thomas looked her in the eye, and he made another choice. No, ma'am. Not tonight. The Duchess studied him. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then she nodded. If you do, tell her we need to speak. Urgently. She turned and walked away. Thomas let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He had just lied to royalty. But something told him it was the right thing to do. Somewhere in the castle, Louise was running. And the storm was just beginning. Louise didn't stop running until she reached the old library. It was tucked away in the West Wing, a place hardly anyone used anymore. Dust covered the shelves. The air smelled like old paper and forgotten things. She locked the door behind her and leaned against it, breathing hard. Her mind raced. Her mother was looking for her. That meant they knew. They knew she had heard something. Or maybe Charlotte had told them about the text. Louise pulled out her phone and stared at it. She wanted answers. But from who? Everyone she trusted had been lying to her. She opened her contacts, scrolled past her parents, past Charlotte, past her brother. Then she stopped. There was one person who might tell her the truth, someone who had always been honest, even when it hurt. Her grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, had passed away years ago. But there was someone else. Someone who had been around long enough to know the family's buried truths. Lady Pamela, her grandmother's former lady-in-waiting. She was in her 90s now, living quietly in a cottage near Sandringham. But she still had her wits. And more importantly, she had no reason to lie. Louise dialed the number. It rang 3 times. Then a frail but sharp voice answered, *Louise. Is that you, darling? Yes, Louise said, her voice breaking. I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. There was a pause. Then Lady Pamela said, Come see me. Tonight if you can. This isn't a conversation for the phone. Louise's heart pounded. You know, don't you? You know what they've been hiding? I know many things, Lady Pamela said quietly, but whether you're ready to hear them is another matter. I'm ready, Louise said. I have to be. Then come. I'll be waiting. The line went dead. Louise stared at the phone. Her hands were shaking. Lady Pamela knew, and she was willing to talk. That meant one thing. The secret was real, and it was bad enough that no one wanted to say it out loud. Louise unlocked the door and slipped back into the hallway. She needed to get out of the castle. But how? Her mother would have staff watching the exits by now. If she tried to leave through the front, they'd stop her. Then she remembered the garden gate, the one near the rose beds. It was old, barely used, and led to a path that connected to the main road. If she was fast, she could get out before anyone noticed. She moved quickly through the corridors, keeping to the shadows. Her heart hammered in her chest. Every sound made her flinch. She expected someone to step out and stop her at any moment, but no one came. She reached the garden door and pushed it open. The cold air hit her like a slap. The rain had stopped, but the ground was slick with mud. She pulled her coat tighter and ran toward the gate. Behind her, a voice called out, Louise. She froze. It was her father. He stood at the garden door, his face pale in the dim light. Where are you going? Louise turned to face him. Her jaw tightened. Away from here. We need to talk. Oh no, she said. You need to talk. You've needed to talk for 20 years. But you didn't. Her father stepped forward. His expression was pained. It's not what you think. Then what is it? Louise's voice rose. What did you decide before I was born? What have you been hiding from me? He opened his mouth, closed it. For a moment, he looked like a man drowning. I can't or won't. Louise's eyes burned with tears. Because I'm tired of being treated like a child. I'm tired of everyone protecting me from something I have a right to know. Her father looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something she had never seen before. Fear. He was afraid, not of her, but of what she might learn. If I tell you, he said quietly, everything changes. You understand that? Louise's breath caught. Everything's already changed. He nodded slowly. Then he stepped closer. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. Your mother and I made a choice. Before you were born, a choice about your future, about who you would be. What kind of choice? He hesitated. The wind rustled the trees around them. Somewhere in the distance, a gate creaked. There was pressure, he said. From the family? From the institution. They wanted certain things, certain assurances. Louise felt cold. What kind of assurances? Her father's hands clenched. They wanted to make sure that if anything happened, if the line of succession shifted, that you... He trailed off. That I what? Louise's voice shook. That you would be removed from any claim. That you would never be in a position to threaten the order of things. The words hit her like a punch. Louise staggered back. You're saying they erased me? Before I was even born, no. Her father's voice was desperate. We chose a different life for you. A quieter life. You thought you could decide for me, Louise said. Her voice was hollow now. You thought you could choose who I was without ever asking what I wanted. We wanted to protect you. From what? From being myself? Her father had no answer. He just stood there, looking broken. Louise turned and walked toward the gate. Her father called after her. Where are you going? To find someone who will tell me the whole truth, she said. Not just the parts you think I can handle. She pushed through the gate and disappeared into the night. Behind her, the palace loomed like a prison, and for the first time in her life, she was free of it. But the weight of what she had just learned pressed down on her like stone. The drive to Sandringham took 2 hours. Louise borrowed a car from a friend, someone outside the royal circle who didn't ask questions. She drove through the dark countryside with her headlights cutting through the mist. Her mind was numb. They had erased her. Before she even took her first breath, they had decided she wasn't important enough, not royal enough, not worthy of a place in the line. And her parents had gone along with it. She thought about her childhood, the quiet life, the way she was always kept slightly apart from the main family, never quite in the spotlight, never quite given the same attention as her cousins. She had thought it was because her parents wanted to protect her from the pressure, but now she understood. It wasn't protection. It was a decision. A choice made by people who saw her as a problem to be managed. Lady Pamela's cottage sat at the end of a long gravel drive. It was small, ivy-covered, with warm light glowing in the windows. Louise parked the car and sat for a moment, trying to steady herself. Then she got out and knocked on the door. It opened immediately. Lady Pamela stood there, small and frail, but with sharp, knowing eyes. She took one look at Louise and stepped aside. Come in, child. The cottage was warm. A fire crackled in the hearth. Tea was already set out on the table. Lady Pamela gestured for Louise to sit, then poured 2 cups with steady hands. You've spoken to your father, she said. It wasn't a question. Louise nodded. He told me part of it, but I need to hear the rest. Lady Pamela sat down across from her. She studied Louise's face for a long moment. Then she sighed. You were born into a family that values order above all else. Tradition, stability. The line of succession is sacred to them. When your mother was pregnant with you, there were concerns. What kind of concerns? Your parents wanted a different life for their children. A quieter life. But the institution doesn't work that way. They wanted assurances. They wanted to make sure that your children and their children would never complicate the succession. So a deal was made. Louise's hands tightened around her teacup. What kind of deal? Your parents agreed that you and your brother would not hold royal titles, that you would be raised as private citizens away from the spotlight, and in exchange, certain clauses were put in place. Legally binding agreements that would ensure neither of you could ever challenge the line of succession, no matter what happened. The words settled over Louise like a heavy blanket. They signed my future away. They thought they were giving you freedom, Lady Pamela said gently. But yes, in doing so, they also took away your choice. Louise set down her cup. Her hands were trembling. Why didn't they tell me? Because telling you would mean admitting what they'd done. And I think deep down, they were ashamed. They should be. Lady Pamela reached across the table and took Louise's hand. Listen to me, child. What they did was wrong. But they did it out of love. Misguided, perhaps. But love nonetheless. Love doesn't take away someone's identity, Louise said. Her voice broke. Love doesn't erase them. No, Lady Pamela agreed. It doesn't. Louise pulled her hand away. She stood and walked to the window. Outside, the countryside stretched into darkness. She felt untethered, like everything she thought she knew had been a lie. What do I do now? She whispered. That depends, Lady Pamela said. Do you want to fight it? Challenge the agreement? Louise turned. Can I? Legally, perhaps. But it would be a battle. The institution doesn't give up control easily, and it would mean going against your family. Publicly, Louise thought about her parents. her brother, her cousins, the life she had known. If she fought this, she would lose all of it. She would be alone. But if she didn't fight, she would spend the rest of her life knowing she had been silenced before she even had a voice. "I don't know," she said. "I don't know what I want." Lady Pamela stood and walked over to her. She placed a hand on Louise's shoulder. "Then take your time. You don't have to decide tonight. But know this. Whatever you choose, you are not what they made you. You are who you decide to be." Louise felt tears prick her eyes again. She had cried so much tonight. But these tears felt different. Not helpless. Not broken. Just ... sad. For the girl she had been. The girl who never knew the truth. "Thank you," she said quietly. Lady Pamela nodded. "Stay here tonight. Rest. In the morning, things will be clearer." Louise didn't argue. She was exhausted. Emotionally, physically. She let Lady Pamela lead her to a small guest room. The bed was soft. The room was quiet. But sleep didn't come easily. She lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling. Her phone buzzed. Messages from her mother, her father, Charlotte. She didn't read them. She didn't want to hear apologies or excuses. Not yet. Instead, she thought about Officer Blake, the guard who had helped her, who had lied for her. She wondered if he was in trouble now. If her mother had figured out that he knew something, she made a mental note to thank him, to make sure he didn't suffer for his kindness. Then she closed her eyes and tried to find peace in the silence. But the storm inside her raged on. Louise woke to the smell of tea and toast. Sunlight streamed through the curtains. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then it all came rushing back. The conversation. The secret. The choice her parents had made. She got out of bed and found Lady Pamela in the kitchen. The old woman smiled. "Good morning. I thought you might be hungry." Louise sat down. She wasn't sure if she could eat, but she took a piece of toast anyway. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Louise spoke. "I've made a decision." Lady Pamela looked at her. "And I'm not going to fight the agreement," Louise said. "Not legally. Not publicly." Lady Pamela nodded slowly. "Why?" "Because I don't want to spend my life in court battles. I don't want to be defined by anger and resentment." Louise set down her toast. "But I'm also not going to pretend it didn't happen. I'm not going to let them sweep it under the rug. What will you do?" "I'm going to talk to them. All of them. My parents, my brother, the family. And I'm going to tell them exactly how I feel. No more secrets. No more protection. They're going to hear the truth." Lady Pamela smiled. "That takes courage, or stupidity," Louise said. But there was a hint of humor in her voice now. A spark of something that hadn't been there last night. She stood. "Thank you for everything." Lady Pamela walked her to the door. "Remember, child, you are not what they made you. You are what you choose to become." Louise hugged her. Then she got in the car and drove back too. Windsor, the drive felt different this time. Lighter. She still felt hurt, betrayed, but she also felt something. Elle's clarity. She knew what she needed to do when she arrived at the castle. It was late afternoon. The sun was low in the sky. She walked through the front entrance, past the guards who nodded respectfully. She didn't look for her parents. She went straight to the drawing room where family meetings were held. She opened the door. Her mother and father were there. Her brother James, Charlotte, even a few other relatives. They all turned when she entered. Her mother stood. "Louise." "Sit down," Louise said. Her voice was calm, but firm. "All of you." They hesitated. Then they sat. Louise stood in front of them, her back straight, her hands steady. "I know," she said. "I know about the agreement. I know what you decided before I was born." Her mother's face went pale. Her father looked down at his hands. Charlotte bit her lip. "And I'm not here to yell at you," Louise continued. "I'm not here to make a scene. But I am here to tell you how wrong it was." Her father opened his mouth. Louise held up a hand. "You decided my future without me. You erased my voice before I even had one. You thought you were protecting me. But what you really did was take away my right to choose. She looked at each of them. Do you understand how that feels? To know that the people you trust most in the world saw you as a problem to be solved? Her mother's eyes filled with tears. We never saw you that way. Then why did you agree to it? Louise's voice didn't rise. It stayed steady. Why did you let them erase me? Silence. No one had an answer. Because there wasn't a good one. Louise took a breath. I'm not going to fight the agreement. I'm not going to drag this family through the courts. But I am going to live my life on my terms. I'm going to make my own choices. And if any of you try to control me again, try to decide what's best for me without asking, I will walk away, and I won't come back. Her brother James stood. Lou, we didn't know. If we had, you would have done what? Louise looked at him. You would have stopped them? Or would you have stayed quiet, just like everyone else? James didn't answer. He sat back down. Louise looked at Charlotte. You knew. For how long? Charlotte's voice was barely a whisper. 5 years. I overheard my mother talking about it. She made me promise not to tell you. Why didn't you? Because I was scared, Charlotte said. Tears ran down her face. I was scared you'd hate me, that you'd hate all of us. Louise felt her anger soften. Just a little. I don't hate you, but I'm hurt. And it's going to take time for me to trust you again. I understand. Louise turned to her parents. I love you. Both of you. But you hurt me deeply. And I need space to figure out who I am without you trying to protect me from the truth. Her mother stood. Please, Louise. Don't leave like this. Not leaving, Louise said. I'm just setting boundaries. And if you love me, you'll respect them. Her mother nodded through her tears. We will, I promise. Louise looked at her father. He met her gaze. I'm sorry, he said. His voice broke. I'm so sorry. Louise felt her own tears threaten, but she held them back. She had cried enough. Now it was time to move forward. I know, she said. And maybe one day, that will be enough. She turned and walked toward the door. As she reached it, she stopped. One more thing. They all looked at her. Officer Blake, the guard who was on duty last night. He helped me. If anyone punishes him for that, I'll make sure the whole world knows about this agreement. Understood? Her mother nodded quickly. He won't be punished. Good, Louise. Walked out. The hallway felt different now. The walls didn't press in on her anymore. She felt lighter. Free. She didn't know what her future looked like. But for the first time it was hers to decide, asterisk. 3 weeks later, Louise stood in the East Gallery again. The same place where she had cried, where her world had collapsed. But this time, she wasn't crying. She was painting. She had always loved art. It was one of the few things that felt truly hers. After everything that had happened, she decided to reclaim the spaces that had once brought her pain. The gallery was the first. Her easel was set up near the window. The canvas was half finished. Blues and grays. A stormy sky, but with a hint of light breaking through the clouds. Footsteps echoed behind her. She didn't turn around. She knew who it was. Your Royal Highness, Officer Blake said. Louise smiled. You can call me Louise. He stepped closer. I wasn't sure if I should come, but I wanted to check on you. Louise set down her brush and turned to face him. I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. Thomas studied her face. She looked different, lighter, more at peace. I'm glad. Thank you, Louise said. For that night, for helping me, for not asking questions. It was the right thing to do. Not everyone would have done it. Thomas shrugged. Maybe, but you needed someone on your side, and I happened to be there. Louise walked over to him. My mother kept her word. You weren't punished, were you? No, in fact, she thanked me. Said I showed good judgment. Louise laughed. That must have been a surprise. It was. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Louise spoke again. I wanted you to know that I told them. Everything. I confronted my family. I set boundaries. And it felt good. I'm proud of you, Thomas said. You don't even know me, Louise said with a smile. But she remembered he had said the same thing that night. And somehow it felt like he did know her. The parts that mattered, anyway. I know enough, Thomas said. I know you're strong and brave, and that you didn't let them break you. Louise felt warmth spread through her chest. I'd help, Thomas smiled. Well, if you ever need help again, you know where to find me. I do. He nodded and turned to leave. But Louise stopped him. Thomas? He looked back. Do you think people can really change? She asked. Or do we just become better at hiding who we are? Thomas thought about it. I think we're always changing. Every choice we make shapes us. The question is whether we're changing into someone we're proud of. Eloise nodded. I think I'm getting there. I know you are. Left. Louise turned back to her painting. She picked up her brush and added more light to the sky. More hope. Her phone buzzed. A message from her mother. Lunch tomorrow? Just the two of us? Louise stared at it. Part of her wanted to say no, to keep her distance, but another part of her knew that healing wasn't about cutting people off. It was about learning to trust again. Slowly, carefully, she typed back. Okay, but we talk. Really talk. Her mother's response came quickly. I promise. Louise set down her phone. She looked around the gallery. The walls that had once felt like a prison now felt like a canvas, something she could fill with her own colors. Her own story. She thought about the night she had cried here, the night she learned the truth. It had broken her, but it had also freed her, because now she knew, and knowing meant she could choose. She could choose forgiveness, or distance, or something in between. She could choose to let the past define her, or to use it as fuel to create something new. She chose the latter as the sun set outside the window. Casting golden light across the gallery, Louise added the final touches to her painting. The storm was still there, but so was the light, and the light was winning. She stepped back and looked at it. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers, and that was enough. Somewhere in the castle, life went on. Routines, traditions, secrets, still whispered in dark corners. But Louise was no longer afraid of them. She had faced the biggest secret of all, and she had survived, more than survived. She had found herself. She cleaned her brushes and packed up her supplies. Tomorrow, she would have lunch with her mother. They would talk. Maybe they would argue. Maybe they would cry. But they would try. And that was more than she had 3 weeks ago. As she walked out of the gallery, she passed a mirror. She stopped and looked at herself. Really looked. She saw a young woman who had been hurt, who had been lied to, but also a young woman who had stood up for herself, who had demanded to be heard. She saw strength and resilience and hope. She smiled at her reflection. Then she walked away. The palace would always be part of her story, but it would no longer define her. She was Lady Louise Windsor, not because of a title, not because of a family name, but because she chose to be. And that made all the difference. Outside, Officer Thomas Blake stood at his post. He watched Louise walk past. She gave him a small wave. He nodded back. He didn't know what the future held for her, but he knew she would face it on her own terms, and in a palace full of rules and expectations. That was the most rebellious thing of all. The guard had revealed the hidden tension. The tears had been shed. The truth had been spoken. Now it was time to heal. And healing, Louise was learning, was the bravest choice of all.